Uh, This is Trustee Coles, and as chair of the Workforce and Organizational Effectiveness Committee, I'm going to chair this particular joint committee meeting with the Audit Committee Chair.
In case you forgot, we delay in case you use foul language.
And but I'm joined here at the table with Chair Erlinson of the Audit Committee to my right, and we are meeting as a joint committee to receive the results of the recent payroll audit. We're welcoming to our table, and these are two of our liaisons, but there's perhaps four that we might invite up if they're present. Have we got everybody? Michael Burnt, we added. So we've got President Charlier, President Inch, President Burnt, who spoke earlier. Is President Downs with us? Okay, good. So we've got three of our four liaisons. Thank you, by the way, for all the work you do for both of our committees. And I'll take a roll of the two committees at this time. Trustee Erlinson.
Here.
Trustee Grabowska.
Here.
Trustee Hipsch. Trustee Jana Johnson. Trustee Murillo. Trustee Sharon.
Here. Thank you, Chair Coles, Chair Erlinson, members of the committee. I have with me at the table here Chris Jeffrey, who's a principal with Baker Tilly, and also Alex Ledke, who's a senior manager with Baker Tilly, and then, of course, my colleague, Eric Davis. So I just want to give a little bit of background about this audit that's on our audit plan this year. The Chancellor specifically asked us to perform this audit to try to ascertain information about root causes of over and underpayments in our payroll, and also to form some potential solutions. The audit focused on 13 key questions, which we answered in our report. The recommendations we will discuss with you today zero in on the most common cause of under and overpayments, which is timing issues with approval of faculty workload. There is no one solution to this issue, but we do believe there are opportunities for continuous improvement and goal setting in all parts of the process, particularly at the beginning of semesters. There remains a disconnect between the deadlines set by the system office for faculty workload approval and some of the very practical realities at the institutions, which the system needs to reconcile in order to make meaningful improvements and meet the goal of reduction. So with those introductory remarks, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and to Alex to get into some of our findings and recommendations.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you all here today. I think we could advance the slides here. I think we're a couple of slides ahead, or I can actually do it. All right, so we wanted to start out our discussion today on a few things that we found that we thought were really working well. So first, non-faculty payroll continues to be working really, really well. We did take a look at previous findings that related to payroll, and we did find that most of those have been resolved, and that's coming from reports like the HRTSM report that we did a couple of years ago. And we also found that the entire team involved in the Workday payroll implementation have and continue to be working really, really hard and making significant efforts to get employees paid and to resolve any issues when they came up. So we wanted to mention those things. So I'm going to flip over here and talk about some opportunities that we saw. So and we'll talk a little bit about some of our recommendations, our internal audits recommendations to address these, and Alice will talk about those in a couple of minutes. So So the switch to Workday has exacerbated some of the faculty pay issues. Payroll continues to more significantly impact contingent faculty, so say think adjunct faculty. Scheduling and other delays continue to cause pay issues and require error corrections. And then within the Workday Go Live, faculty are unable to or have been unable to verify the accuracy of their pay. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but there is a solution that's being worked on around that. And then another observation that we had is reducing late hires could increase the timeliness and the accuracy of faculty pay. And then this was just sort of an interesting observation that we had, but over 55% of late class additions were for introductory courses. So we think that there's some commonality there. And then the last really observation that we had or opportunity that we had is that the overpayment collection policy could use to be strengthened. So 42% of uncollected overpayments are from fiscal years 18 through fiscal year 24, and our scope really went up to part of fiscal year 25. So some of these are relatively aged. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex to talk a little bit about what our recommendations are, as well as what management's response does. So Alex, to you.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. Taking a look at the first recommendation here, I'll put the slide. So Minnesota State should take a multi-step approach to reducing late payments and corrections. The sub-recommendations in line with that are: one, to ensure consistent and impactful tone from leadership, including consistent messaging regarding faculty workload approval deadlines and the legal effects of not meeting these. And with that, the management response in line with that was, an agreement, and that's both systems and campus leaders should regularly set and renew goals to minimize the number of late adjustments. The second one, reduce the volume of late course approvals and late hiring through goals and continuous improvement strategies and evaluation over late add intro courses, as Chris alluded to, and late approvals. And again, from a management response standpoint, with this one, it was partially agree. Inevitable fluctuations at the start of every semester make it challenging to set and improve all instructional loads. And then the third one here, leveraging system knowledge and resources, and including the reinforcement of the benefits of being a system, leaning on some of the knowledges and resources to support across the system. And with this one, the management response was mostly in disagreement, pointing to the fact that there is little knowledge and resources left at our colleges and universities to leverage during peak processing times, in large part due to some significant turnover and lack of familiarity within some of the processes. Jumping into the second item, Minnesota State should improve its capabilities by automating data tracking and reporting. The first kind of sub-recommendation in line with that is to leverage Workday reporting capabilities and work to reduce manual logging of errors, leverage dashboards, leverage the technology that Workday provides. The management response for this one was in agreement, in that reports such as the pay details report are currently under development and are of high urgency and priority. The second recommendation or sub-recommendation being provide employees sufficient information about their pay. And providing employees the ability to self-report and trying to bridge the trust and allow folks to kind of build that relationship and feel confident in their pay. The management response here, again, in agreement, the HCM team is actively working on a remedy for teaching faculty, and that the pay stub alone is not sufficient to validate pay, in particular for faculty. The third item here, identify or acquire Workday reporting expertise to assist in further developing robust reporting within Workday, which again, the management response was in agreement, and alluding to that the HCM team has recently filled a vacant sustainment position to primarily focus on this initiative. And then moving into the third recommendation here to improve overpayment collection policies. Kind of in line with that, the sub recommendation here to just have defined policies and include timelines for collecting overpayments that ensure, the elimination of lengthy repayment times and that non-collection can be reduced. And the management response here was in agreement in that the Systems Office HR division will publish system guidelines for processing overpayments of salary or wages and setting timelines and parameters for the collection of overpayments. And then on this slide, we've included a chart here that helps to illustrate the percentage of outstanding overpayments as of 10/22/24 and the fiscal year in which they relate to further illustrate the point of trying to enhance these collection policies.
Excuse me, Alex, I can't quite help myself. What would the total overpayment receivable be? Thank you. Trustee Owens.
Quick related question on this. So, we and the employees would have paid FICA taxes on these overpayments, and the employee would have paid possibly federal and state income taxes. Perhaps how does that work? I mean, they could file an amended return. I don't know how far back for the IRS, but the FICA tax thing, I mean, overpayments, we're paying taxes we didn't need to, right? Can we get them back?
Chair Coles, Vice Chair Erlinson, if we discover and can correct an overpayment in the year that it's paid, then we can reverse the check and correct it, and it's perfect. If you are right, if the tax year closes and the employee pays their state income taxes plus has other benefits like retirement, pension deductions, other things calculated against the higher rate of pay, then we'll have to do an amended W-2 to make the employee whole. So it is cumbersome, and wherever we have the opportunity to correct an overpayment in the same year, we want to capitalize on that opportunity without fail.
Good, thank you. Please continue, Alex, if you have more.
Yes, of course, thank you. Thinking on this one.
So sorry, Alex. We've opened the gates. Trustee Hipsch.
As we go back to a couple of slides where we talk about the leverage system knowledge and resources, and the management responses mostly disagree. I'd love to get a little more context on there, because as I read it, I would think, well, okay, they might not have the knowledge. Now we might have to do some training, but why the mostly disagree with that idea of leveraging system knowledge and resources?
Chair Coles, Trustee Hipsch, the disagreement is grounded principally in two things. One is the capacity on the campus to augment the service center. So peak processing time for the service center is also a peak demand time for HR resources on campus. And they have a role to play also in terms of onboarding and processing transactions that ultimately translate into pay. And so the HR offices do not have excess capacity to augment the service center in our assessment. Secondarily, to the question of capability. So in many cases, the turnover, since we've been operating in a service center environment about 6 years now, the turnover on our campuses is 100%. So we have folks that have never done this work, ever. So for us to train them to augment the service center in peak processing times, pulling them in effect from the campus at a time that's in high demand for their services on campus, in my estimation, is not workable. What I would prefer to do is seek and hire a seasonal workforce or cadre, perhaps of recent retirees, with the skill sets that we can refresh quickly, bring them on board between, say, mid-July and mid-September. which would help us be more responsive in terms of timelines. Right now, we need campuses to approve and submit faculty workload about 2 weeks in advance of the pay period that they would like to pay the employee. And we consistently do not meet that deadline. So if we can perhaps augment the service center, we might be able to shrink the processing time so that we have a little more time to play with.
Please, Trustee Hibbs.
I guess I'll direct this one back to Baker Tilly. I'm assuming some of that information was known as you put together your recommendations. Hearing that response back, does it change your thinking or your recommendation of what you were bringing forward, or have you run into this in other institutions?
Thanks for the question, Trustee Hipsch and Chair Coles. So when we performed this audit, we actually did talk with campuses in depth, especially in the HR area. And what we heard quite often, I mean, I will agree with my colleague, Vice Chancellor Davis, that there are a lot of people that are out on campuses that are newer, but they also have a desire to kind of understand what the downstream impact is of some of the decisions that are being made on the campus. And so when we talked to people on campus, they did express a willingness to help at the service center. And we really felt that that could help kind of enhance the understanding between the service center and the campuses of kind of how, you know, how something happens at a campus, how it kind of plays the downstream effect to the system office. And so we made that recommendation for a couple of different reasons. One, just because, you know, again, when we're looking at this kind of solution, you know, I think enhancing the understanding between the institutions and the system office is important, but also, you know, trying to keep in mind that, you know, maybe it would be more cost effective to have people help out who are already within the system rather than having to hire extra people. So that's where we kind of drew the line there.
Chris, Trustee Rector, you had a question. Okay, fine. Trustee Johnson, please.
Just wanted to respond, maybe sort of respond to it, just for your information. My background is health insurance administration operations, and I served as a interim HR person for a year, so I played it on TV, right? You know, so I was responsible for payroll. In the end, it's all about accuracy. I mean, do it right the first time. And so I think both solutions seem reasonable. What you have to do, though, is figure out how do you get it right the first time, and then build your process of, because we're human beings here, of how to resolve very quickly. I saw a number of an average of 106 days to resolve issues. Like, I mean, it should be 24 hours. Should be your standard. And we can argue about it all you want, but in the end, I mean, you're all health insurance members. And if we said, oh, it's not our fault, your employer made such a late decision, we can't help it that you can't get your script on January 1st, you probably wouldn't be really happy with the health insurance company. So, you know, you got to build your processes recognizing that things happen and flexibility is needed. And if it means a interim workforce, because these, you know, what times a year these are going to happen. I used to say to my staff, oh my God, December happens every year. Can you imagine that? Oh, you know, because our business turned over on January 1st. Recognize it and build the processes. And then to the presidents, yeah, you need flexibility, but you also want your people to be paid right. So and to the unions, your contracts, you know, it's hard to do this. So everybody's got to give a little so that you reach your common goal of do it right the first time, would be my pushback, and think outside the box. So both are reasonable approaches. I've used what I call graduates, people that used to work there that now are in different jobs, called them back, paid them overtime, or interim forces where you train them over the summer and they're ready to go. But you've got to get it right. These results are not acceptable. So everyone needs to change.
If I may, Trustee Johnson, when we made this recommendation too, I think we were trying to be very clear that we're hopeful that as Workday matures, there will be more automated types of corrections of payroll errors so that it isn't so labor intensive. Obviously, management has the right to implement the recommendation however they want to implement it, right? So it's not the hill I'm going to die on that you have to use campus resources. I mean, that's definitely not the goal here. But I think, the point that I want to make is this issue is not going to go away without what you said. There has to be fewer errors on the front end. There needs to be quicker resolution on the back end. And so whatever way management decides that they want to kind of implement that, quicker resolution on the back end, like I said, that's not the hill I'm going to die on. But I will say, though, that when we talk with the campuses, I think especially because there's so many new people in the HR offices on campus, there's definitely a desire for them to understand a little bit more about how does this actually work. When we send 200 transactions to the system office, it's kind of a black hole. So how does that work? So again, just trying to kind of enhance our systemness and enhance the understanding of the entire process.
Chair Sol?
As I understand it, the principal reason for these erroneous payments is the late adding classes and not getting professors signed up to get paid properly. Maybe Vice Chancellor Davis, can you give us a timeline of how this happens? When is the class added? When does the data have to be into the wherever MMB or into our system to get somebody paid properly? And what steps are in between?
Chair Coles, Chair Soul. The Service Center has service level agreements with the 33 colleges and universities that they serve. Those service level agreements specify timelines in which faculty workload needs to be assigned and approved in order to be paid. And so the problem manifests because, particularly at our college sector, but also at our university sector, where you have open enrollment institutions, you have fluctuating enrollment, you have changes even after the start of the academic year that will, create the conditions in which the college, my colleagues can certainly add to this, where they need to make late additions or changes in faculty assignments. This might look like overload or reduction in courses or changing the faculty load of a contingent faculty member. Regardless how it manifests, if the approval comes in after the payroll deadline, the payroll processing team has insufficient time to make the entries into Workday. That would then transmit to the state of Minnesota, because we pay through Semaphore, through the state, in time for that on-cycle pay. And so what we do then is we make an off-cycle adjustment in some cases, or an on-cycle adjustment. So we would pay retroactive to their faculty members' first day of pay. And then by Minnesota state law, I need to pay everybody within 31 days of their first day of work on cycle. So those are the timelines that we're attentive to. But to your question, the way this problem manifests is adjustments in a faculty assignment after the payroll processing deadline. In some cases, we can do that. In recent years, where enrollment has risen considerably at many of our colleges and universities, the volume of those adjustments is far exceeds the capacity of the payroll processing unit. I'd like, if my colleagues would like to add or amend something about that, I think it would be enlightening.
Please, President Shirley.
Thank you, Chair Coles and Chair Erlinson. Yes, there's not a colleague amongst us that doesn't want to pay faculty appropriately. There's no worse conversation with a faculty member that you're not going to get paid on time. Well, there is one that we've overpaid you. That's even worse, right? It's very difficult conversation. But as Trustee Johnson was talking, what it makes me think of is there is a bit of a mismatch in processes. So Vice Chancellor Davis shared with you, as an open access institution, our goal is to serve students. And the payroll processing deadline is July 15th. 30% of our enrollment comes in after July 15th, not occasionally. In fact, my poor IR staff, I asked them, please pull the data for the last 3 years.
It was 29% 3 years ago, 31%, and then 30%. So these are the people we serve. I mean, they make decisions very, very late. And last meeting, we were talking about how fiscally conservative we have to be. So the other option is just to put a whole bunch of courses on and just hope, which you don't want us to do either. So instead, what we do is we look at past data. We try to predict in some ways we can, right? We can take risk that is not terribly risky and put those courses on earlier. But in order to be fiscally conservative, we hold waiting lists. When we get to a certain point, then we'll add another section on. But they almost invariably happen after July 15th. And when this is exacerbated by enrollment increase at Central Lakes College, we're 10%. We had no idea that was even coming. So what we do instead is talk to the faculty and say, okay, this is what this means for you, right? This is the first payroll deadline has passed. It doesn't mean we're late. The classes have not started for another month, but we'd like you to understand what this means for your payroll so that they have full understanding and we're being very transparent. We feel like that's the best we can do. And our academic and student affairs team works really hard on that piece. So that's the reality. And
Thank
Follow up on this.
Trustee Johnson.
I'm going to watch this. 39%, 30%. It happens every year.
for my institution, and that is the number that my colleagues tell me about, but yes, that is a pattern at the two-year institution. 30% are very late deciders, well before the beginning of the semester, but between.
We serve so many students. If that number is true, work with the state of Minnesota to do a special payroll run. I mean, use the strength of the magnitude of the state of Minnesota State to do. I mean, that's the kind of, you just have to, you have to push past the can'ts and won'ts and do the will. And I mean, and I'm saying this to all of you, you all have to make some changes if you're going to get it right, but push.
Chair Coles, Trustee Johnson, just so you know, we do off-cycle pay runs, absolutely. The issue with an off-cycle pay run is while I take out standard withholdings of that check, I am not able to direct any benefits enrollments or voluntary enrollments on the part of an employee, let's say a deduction for their parking or those kinds of things. And so as a consequence, those things become a debt to the state. They need to be taken out of the first on-cycle check, which means the on-cycle check is much less than the off-cycle. So we tend to work with the HR office and with the impacted employee to work out an agreement if it creates a hardship, and we'll do the off-cycle check. So we can do that. But you do put your finger on an issue. Our academic year is not conformed to the state's payroll calendar. They are two separate and distinct entities, and they run independently of one another. And so the decisions we make on our campus that are concerning with our academic year are not with reference to the payroll calendar. And so this conflict we have comes around.
Use the chancellor's muscles to do not an off-cycle payroll, but to do a regular, find a way to make it right.
Thank you. Do you have a response? Very good. Thank you, Trustee Johnson. I want to check in with well, it's tough to beat, what she said, except I guess I would just say this is not uncommon in any system, any university, anywhere. And it's simply because, particularly for first-time, full-time students, their schedules are fluid, and some of them have not made decisions about even what university they're going to go to, or what college they're going to, whether they're going to go to South Central or ours until after July 15th. There are solutions to this. Other places have found really good solutions that we ought to be thinking about. There are some other things we can do that don't require, having the state change the way it does payroll, perhaps. But we run into this all the time. But as we've discussed, we don't open classes until there's students to fill the classes. And Because to do so, you end up with a lot of empty space and a lot of payroll dollar going out the door. Very hard act to follow. I think I would just add that what we see too is just the turnover in our faculty. So sometimes you will have a faculty member for life intervenes and they suddenly can't teach the 5 classes they were scheduled to teach. And in some of the disciplines, it's almost impossible to find instructors. And so you are until the very last hour trying to find somebody that can teach so you don't have to cancel that class and turn away all these students. So that's the reality we do do. Thank you. Trustee Erlinson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry we've thrown all these questions like after 2 slides, but since we're on a roll, I guess I'll keep going. I'm going to have a different perspective. I have owned my own small business for 20 years, and sometimes the bigger the company or client, the longer it takes them to pay, 6 months, whatever, and you just have to deal with it. I'm not saying we shouldn't be empathetic, but if I were a faculty for hire person and I might teach at the U a class and at Normandale a class and I think this happens, and at Metro a class, I'm sort of an independent contractor, not a full-time employee. And so again, like a small business person who isn't on a normal payroll cycle, and you have to say, X county, why haven't you paid me for 6 months? Because that just happened with a big county in Minnesota. They paid their people on time, but they don't care if you can pay your bills. I don't know. It's somewhat of a mindset. I understand, and I agree with our faculty for advocating for these folks, because and we've heard from them. It's like, do we even have any teaching? But if we can't get the state, and it's why people don't like government. No, we're not going to accommodate you. Too bad. We're not going to do an extra run. I like that idea. We got to figure out how to communicate so people aren't so let down. And it sounds like you're trying your very best to do that. I do and don't want to forget this overpayment, years in arrears, and maybe they all have ADHD like me and are late on everything, but it's really awful if we're dealing with FICA and taxes years after the fact. So I hope you'll address how to fix that.
Thank you, Chair Coles. I appreciate it. One thing I want to make sure that we don't skip over is we tried to really be thoughtful about looking at, we only looked at 1 year, and I think we should probably look at more, but the fact that 55% of the late class ads are introductory level type of courses. And what we did notice is that late courses often translate into late hires, not always, but often. And so is there a way, we kind of alluded to this in the recommendations, is there a way that we can use our system that's with that knowledge that we know that we're going to need to add college algebra classes, we're going to need college algebra teachers? Is there a way to figure out as a system, because as I'm hearing, it's hard to hire these people, is there a way that we can have a pool of faculty that are willing and able to teach these kinds of courses, whether they be online or in person or whatever? I think the solution to that piece is systemness. I think it might be better to try to create that kind of system solution rather than each institution do it on their own. That's just my opinion.
That's good. Thank you. I actually want to we're focusing very specifically on the issues around the transition to Workday and the specific impact, or we've been focusing in our discussion on faculty pay at the beginning of semesters, correct? You have an assessment leaving aside that set of conditions, although I would include the Workday transition. Did you have a look, Mr. Jeffries or Lutke, at our performance in providing accurate payments on time for the other times and categories of our employees? In other words, are we doing a good job outside of the specific set of issues that we've been focusing on?
And I can take that one, Chair Coles. I'm sorry for turning you off there prematurely. But yes, we did take a look at that, and and by and large, and certainly Alex jump in here too. But by and large, we felt that the rest of the payroll transactions were happening accurately, timely as they should be. So this is really more of a faculty pay issue, and so that's really what we found to be, kind of the area area of opportunity. And I will say too that this is something that we do see, across the rest of our higher education clients too. So this isn't something that's really just specific to Minnesota State, but it is a challenge. So.
Thank you. Let me just look, and we may have started our questions prematurely, Vice Chancellor Davis. If you had a particular prepared set of remarks or slides that go beyond, perhaps you'd talk us through this last set of recommendations. If it may be your slide, Mr. Ledke, but can you describe the steps in your response and the timing and why that timing is what you're proposing?
Thank you, Chair Coles. Yes, I can do that. And if before I turn my mic off, I'll also answer Vice Chair Erlingson's question about overpayments. So the reduction of late payments. This is an area that we focus on. And to Trustee Johnson's observation, I wouldn't want to leave the board with the impression that we have some tolerance for mediocrity. We do not. Our aim is 100% right every single time, 26 pay periods a year, several 100,000 payroll warrants each time. So I don't want to leave that impression. That is our goal. And what I think we've described for you are some really complex issues that operate at Minnesota State that don't operate at other state agencies where I've worked before, that make that more challenging here. I don't want to empower them as excuses. I just want them to be acknowledged. So reducing the late payments is a goal I've set with Chancellor Olson. We saw our performance in the workday environment initially, and our auditors can back me up on this. Our performance got twice as bad, let's say. We used to have something around 2.5% of our total payroll resulted in some payment that needed a correction, either an underpayment or overpayment. Flipped around 97.5 correct each time, but 92.5 not. And then at the beginning of the fall, you found that rate doubled. We're back down to about 2.5, and we intend to improve from there. So I've given us kind of a 6-month duration to stabilize. It's commensurate with our stabilization in Workday. Improving the reporting capabilities, we brought on some new talent in the HCM team, but you'll see the timeline there is extended and a little ambiguous on the end. It's because it's my assessment that relative to the other recommendations that the auditors have brought forward, it is a lower priority. It is more important for me to get the payment, as you put it quite well, Trustee Johnson, accurate the first time. That's more important to me than reporting on how we did. But obviously I need both. And then the last is the overpayment policies. And we do have a procedure in draft that's circulating. I'm going to comment on it first, and then we'll get some more feedback and then put it out into operation. A little bit about overpayments that I think is important. Minnesota State, by law, must get the employee's written consent to collect overpayments. So I don't have the authority without a judgment from courts to garnish wages. So if we discover an overpayment, I need to work with the employee who is impacted on an overpayment, recovery plan. The current guidelines published by the state permits the option to repay across several pay periods. That's the actual language so we have entered into some agreements around the system that are permissive of very long time horizons for collecting the overpayments. The guidance that I want to put out of the system office would make those time horizons, set boundaries around those time horizons, and bring that more under control. The only remedy for Minnesota State to collect an overpayment which an employee does not consent to allow us to recover is to seek a judgment in conciliation with court. So it is overpayments. I think you put it well. Like you'd rather have a late payment or an underpayment than an overpayment. And I think administratively, I would agree, they are burdensome to recover. And so putting out these policies, though, these guidance will help us set sort of guardrails for all of our campuses so that we at least do it in a consistent way. I think that's going to be important. So that's my, I don't know if you have any follow-up.
Is that state law? And do they have the same with the Minnesota Department of Revenue? And they overpay a refund to a taxpayer, I can choose to not sign a paper and not send them the money? Or is it just for us? Because the IRS doesn't have that.
Chair Coles, Vice Chair Erlinson, this is the interplay of two statutes. First would be Minnesota Statute 571.922, which concerns garnishment of wages and the procedures and rights that Minnesota employees have, not just Minnesota State, all Minnesota employees, regardless of sector or where they're employed. And then Minnesota Statute 16D.16, which sets a duty on the state as a public employer to recover any debts to the state, which would include working with the Department of Revenue to collect debts owed to the state through taxes, like taxes refunded to the employee, for example. With a judgment, you can collect that debt. So those are the two laws that I'm concerned with when it comes to collecting overpayment.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Davis. I have one question about the improving reporting capabilities. There was one call out in the auditor's report specific to the lack of a record for faculty members to be able to see a detailed accounting of how their pay period, their paycheck was constructed. That seemed to be a rather familiar and now missing practice within the system. Is that a priority in your improving reporting capabilities, or is that a change? Is there some change that's going to occur there?
Chair Coles, thank you for the question. It is a priority. It remains on our top 5 priority list for workday improvements. I expect a pay details report to be available to payroll or to faculty in April of 2025. We're currently on pace to do that. So I continue to represent to the board that that's where we are. It is contingent on posting actual payrolls to Workday. Through Semaphore, we've had some issues with integrations with Workday that would create duplicate records for some faculty members. It didn't create duplicate pay, thank goodness, but it did create duplicate records. And so we have a lot of cleanup behind the scenes to do before I can publish and make accessible a pay details report. But as the auditors observed in their report, and I also included in my management response, a pay stub through the state is insufficient for faculty. They cannot discern whether they're being paid accurately from the pay stub alone.
Trustee Hipsch?
Thank you, Chair Coles. Vice Chancellor Davis, you talked a little bit in one of your comments with regards to SLAs, and I know we haven't talked about it in here, but in the written material, I talked about, I think, 32 or 33 institutions having SLAs kind of locked in, but then also the comment that said the SLAs are very rarely met. Can you talk about what are we doing to kind of bring that in alignment so that we are hitting the SLAs that we agreed to?
Chair Coles, Trustee Hipsch, I can, and thank you for asking. We're actually pulling together a committee with some of our chief human resources officers to take a fresh look at our service level agreement, particularly in the Workday environment. And I was pleasantly surprised at the level of interest in serving on that committee. So we're meeting with representatives from both sectors, college and university sector, and we're going to revise the service level agreement so it better reflects the desired practice between campuses and the service center in the Workday environment. That work has not started yet, but it will commence this semester.
That's very good. We're getting very close to time, so I'm going to turn it over to Chief Auditor Amy Jorgensen.
Thank you, Chair Coles. I didn't want to end the meeting without discussing just a little bit the fact that we do have a legislative auditor. Office of Legislative Auditor is already commencing an audit on this topic area. They will be working with us probably through July. And I did just want to make the board aware of some of the questions that they are trying to answer, which fall very much in line with this conversation. So first question they're trying to answer is, what policies and procedures does Minnesota State have in place to ensure the timely approval of courses and corresponding faculty assignments and payroll? That's the first question. Second question, to what extent has it adhered to these policies and procedures? Second question. Third question is, to what extent has Minnesota State taken appropriate steps to ensure accuracy in its payroll systems? And so I believe that they will use the internal audit kind of as a foundation, and then more than likely go deeper. So this will not be the end of audit discussion around payroll.
Well, we look forward to their presence, but your presence as well. And I would expect timely reports on progress against this topic. It's obviously it's a highly urgent issue to be addressed. And I appreciate the work of the audit, the outside auditors. Thank you for presenting today. And I'm going to adjourn our committee meeting. There's no action to be taken. This is information only. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Let's just take about a 5-minute break and we'll start the Board of Trustees meeting. Cheryl. All right, I will call the meeting of the Board of Trustees to order. Trustees, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll call the name of each trustee to register their attendance. Trustee Coles. He must have stepped out. Trustee Erlinson. Trustee Grabowska. Here. Trustee Hipsch. Here. Trustee Janicic. Trustee Jacqueline Johnson.
Yes.
Trustee Jana Johnson. Here. Trustee Moe. Here. Trustee Maria. Trustee Richter. Here. Trustee Sharon. Here. Trustee Teffer. Here. The chair is here, and Trustee Coles. Thank you. Here. And I think Trustee Erlinson, Vice Chair Erlinson just stepped out for a moment. We'll be back and we'll record her attendance. So we'll start with Student Association and Bargaining Unit comments. For Lead MN, my notes say Christian Catano, Vice President. Come on up. Please introduce yourself to us before you start.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Catano. I am a student at Inver Hills Community College, where I serve as the president of the Senate there. And then through Lead MN, I also serve as vice president. So to begin with our update for the current status of our association, we recently held our Art of the Scholarship event. It was very successful. We had a lot of students who went. Feedback was very good. We had a couple trustees there. I believe I saw the chancellor there as well. So it was overall a very great event where we celebrated the scholarship recipients for our many scholarship programs. And then moving forward, we have a large event coming up, which would be our Advocacy Day, which will be held February 18th at St. Paul College and the state capitol. We are going to work with students to build up their storytelling experience and their advocacy work so that we can properly meet with legislators and work on our organization's initiatives to improve the experiences of students across the state. And then even past that, just a month afterwards, we will be heading to Washington, D.C. for our D.C. Summit that we do annually in collaboration with Today's Students Coalition. That will be March 16th through 18th. And we will likely be visiting the Department of Education to meet with their higher ed staff and talk about student experiences with the with the Department of Education and federal funding. And then we will also meet with legislators and their offices to again work on our initiatives for students. Another quick thing too is that tomorrow we will actually be presenting in front of the Minnesota State Senate Committee on Higher Education. We want to support the system's budget request to make sure that everything is funded and that all things are able to move forward appropriately. So overall, everything is going very well for the organization. Many students are excited to participate through Lead MN, and they're very excited about the future of their education and all the things that we're doing for them and with them. And with that, I'd like to say that overall the consensus is pretty straight. Everyone believes that the future for the association and for the system is bright. Thank you.
All right, we'll put that in the bank. That's excellent. Anyone have any questions for Christian? Sorry, scooped you.
Christian, are you aware of any steps that Lead MN may be taking to inform students who may be in doubt about their status, about the rights and responsibilities that they may have given the tenuous circumstances under which we're currently operating?
Could you elaborate a little bit more on?
DACA students, illegal students, or do you know if Lead MN is providing information to those students to help, I want to use the term ameliorate, any of the anxiety that they may be feeling?
Yeah, so for sure. So we do understand that there's a lot of, again, interesting circumstances that we're under right now. A lot of students are feeling anxiety and stress. I'm not currently aware of any specific initiatives that are directly targeting that. However, we are broadly supporting students and ensuring that they can come to us with any questions or concerns that they have so that we can address them. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I did attend also the Lead MN Scholarship event at St. Paul College along with Trustee Richter, and I thought it was exceptional. And I have been to several over the years, and I thought that the program, the richness of the gathering in terms of the variety of activities, the setting of St. Paul College, for me, it was just a real high point for the organization, and one that I would encourage trustees to flock to next year. If we're held in a similar manner, I just thought it was an outstanding evening. Thank you.
That was great. The music, the jazz music was great too. So, all right. Thank you very much, Christian. Great report. Next, Students United State Chair Sierra Rueger, I think, is joining us by Zoom, or maybe someone else. Oh, no, it's Sarah.
All right, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. Chair Sol, members of the board, it is great to see you all in the new semester. Again, my name is Sierra Rueger, and I serve as the State Chair for Students United. I apologize that I can't join you in person, but today Students United is in the midst of campus visits, and we're at the Mankato State campus today, and I had a meeting with the President's Cabinet, and I was like, where's the President? And then I remembered it's Board of Trustees Day. As it has been a while since we last seen each other, a lot of work has been underway. At the end of November, we connected with both Chancellor Olson and Lead MN's leadership to share updates between our groups. In December, our board of directors gathered following a long but successful finals week to approve a set of board motions and approve the state and federal legislative agendas that were set by our Legislative Priorities Action Committee. Following winter break, the board gathered once again in St. Paul at our office for our spring board retreat. We took the time to discuss a very busy but exciting spring agenda. We have spring campus visits in full swing, and in a few weeks, students from each campus will come together at the state capitol for our spring lobby day, where they will meet with local representatives. And we also began preparing for our federal trip to Washington, D.C. over spring break, where we will be meeting with the Minnesota State delegation to advocate for priorities. Our legislative priorities include increasing state investment in the Hunger-Free Campus Grant, which is a critical tool to combat campus hunger, scaling the direct admissions program, which lets high school students know their options after graduation, and increases FAFSA completion. We are also focused on improving access to naloxone on campuses and ensuring stock in residence halls. We, of course, will also be supporting the Minnesota State System's budget request. Now, as we look at the state of legislature, which I thought student government could be dysfunctional, and the likely tough budget decisions that universities will need to make, I want to emphasize the importance of consultation and having the student voice at the table. As campuses start examining tuition, fees, and rates that affect students, administrators must ensure that there is a robust consultation process. We would also ask for clear communication and expectation setting at the legislative session as the legislative session continues and the funding picture becomes clearer. We are actively tracking and engaging around federal policy and actions that may affect our students or our schools. And I'm sure I don't have to speak at length about the importance of federal funding for critical services at our schools, from our TRIO programs to veteran support services, to mental health services, and to child care support. We hope for additional clarity from the federal government on what's ahead, and we will continue to engage campus and system partners as events arise. Now, lastly, I wanted to thank the board again for your continued support and partnership. It was great to have Chair Soul, Trustee Jana Johnson, and Chancellor Olson join us at our CLF fundraiser in St. Paul just 2 weeks ago. I look forward to returning to the board in March, days after coming back from DC, with a report from our campus visits and updates on our legislative items. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Sierra. Any questions or comments? Trustee Corvallis?
Sierra, if I may, I'd like to ask you the same question that I asked Christian, which is about reaching out to students who may be feeling worried, anxiety about their status as students, and what you may be doing, Students United may be doing for them.
Yes, so today while at Mankato, we did ask actually about what supports are in place, and they mentioned about a immigration attorney who just last week or week before had an open audience, open question opportunity, so students were able to ask questions that they may not have had a source to go to ask. And beyond that, we're just asking each of our campus partners and our directors as situations arise, if there's anything we can do to help, to let us know. Otherwise, we're just really supporting our directors and their student associations and whatever resources they may need.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Okay, ask me, Jennifer Irwin.
Good afternoon, Chair Sewell, Chancellor Olson, and trustees. Thank you for the opportunity to provide remarks today. My name is Jennifer Irwin, and I am the president of the AFSCME Min-State Policy Committee. Thank you to Metro State for hosting. The word of the day is fear. Fear for their jobs, students, state, America, family lives. No one knows what is going on. No one knows what our new federal administration means for our livelihoods, both personal and professional. And no one knows at this point what our own state legislature is doing. There are fear of layoffs, more work being piled on, continued workday frustrations, and a very bleak looking FY26. I have lots of concerns and frustrations and fears that I can share with you from my members, but our fears and concerns are no different than any other person right now. And I'm hoping time and information will settle some of these fears. I do ask our colleges and universities to think about creating safe spaces on campuses where students and employees can go cry, talk, or just sit for a few minutes away from what is going on in their lives. Have compassion and empathy and understanding, and give care for our coworkers, employees, supervisors, and students. Right now, I think that is the best thing that we can do for each other, and I will therefore limit my comments to this. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide remarks, and I will stand for any questions. Although I did want to add, on February 18th, if it doesn't get rescheduled because the legislature hasn't figured out what they're doing, we are holding the Min-State Policy Committee Day on the Hill. So we will be meeting with higher ed, Senate, and House, whoever's there to meet with. So we do have that on the 18th.
Okay, any questions? All right, thank you very much, Jennifer. IFO, Jenna Chernega.
Have to make sure it's on. How's your week been?
so far. I do want to just quickly introduce, we have a guest here today, Evan Gavigan, who's gonna wave from the back. He's the executive director of an organization called Higher Ed Labor United, which is a coalition of higher ed labor unions across the country. And the IFO is affiliated with them, and he's here in part now to help us kind of think through how we might react to some of the things going on at the federal level. I also, before I kind of get into some of my other comments, just want to make a note about payments and the payroll audit conversation. There was some discussion about state law, and state law also allows employers to have 6 years to find any overpayments, but employees only 2 years to find any underpayments, which is something we are hoping to address at some point. So. Earlier today, you met one of the IFO members from Southwest, the basketball coach, Dr. Klinkner, and I believe his presentation provided an important demonstration of the role that athletics plays in our institutions. The sense of belonging, spirit of teamwork, and pride that athletics cultivates for our students. Our coaches are experts at cultivating belonging, and all of them are key recruiters for our campuses. So I know there was a question about whether he was recruiting students to the basketball team or the wheelchair basketball team. And indeed, all of our coaches are spending most of their non-season time recruiting students to our institutions. Coach Klinkner is a great example of how our coaches contribute to our universities. We've got challenges in front of us. AI, state funding, and a variety of attacks from the federal government have just been happening, or we've been talking about for the last 2 days. It's easy to feel tired and discouraged, but this moment requires us to remain steadfast in the face of these challenges. The IFO is certainly committed to that. In terms of AI, it was clear to me from Dr. Hageruth's presentation that the challenges and opportunities of AI will require a variety of expertise, and it demonstrates the continued need for both teaching and hiring ethics, philosophy, history, sociology, professors and students. Unfortunately, these are the very programs that have been targeted consistently for budget reductions and faculty reductions in our 7 state universities. Indeed, I believe less than half of our universities currently have an operational philosophy department. So as we make our way through this brave new world, I hope that the system will commit to ensuring that every instructor of record will continue to be a living person. It is clear from the system experiences we heard. It's clear that right? It's clear from the system experiences that we heard about that human action and decision-making is still required when using these tools. Also, faculty expertise is going to be critical in helping lead the system's AI work. Currently, MSCF and IFO only have 1 seat apiece on the group that will periodically review and adapt the AI guidance document. In contrast, there are 21 other committee members, including experts in IT, system employees, instructional designers. After hearing yesterday's presentation, I believe that the group would benefit from more faculty involvement to represent areas that have expertise in ethics, bias, and inequality. Yesterday, as we were all scrambling to figure out what the federal funding pause would mean for higher education, I deeply appreciate the communication that the system and individual campuses put out to keep people as informed as possible. The most important thing we can do to maintain our steadfast values is to work together, share information, and keep our ultimate goals in mind. And I'd be willing to answer any questions.
Thank you, Trustee Erlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jen, I just want to, the coach was great, and it reminded me that the program and the stories that he shared provide heart, like emotional, my spine, I had chills down my spine. And often our story that we share both with recruitment and with the legislature is only logical and it doesn't move people. And I think we need to add more examples of how wonderful and unique our system and our colleges and universities are, and how we serve people that otherwise aren't served.
I appreciate that, Trustee Erlinson. I will assure the board that while the Min-State presentation looks the way you have seen it, each of the bargaining units also often presents to the higher ed committees, and we bring in faculty from around the system to talk about those very things. In addition, some of my colleagues have talked about their days on the Hill. We have a similar day when we get to go meet individually with members of the higher ed committee, the higher ed committees, and the representatives and senators that represent our campus areas. So.
Okay, any other questions?
I would urge you and your colleagues, I think we need to go up the food chain to the people that decide the funding allocations. We need more money in the higher ed budget.
Yeah. Thanks.
Hello, Chair Sol, Chancellor, trustees. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Yesterday's presentation, Jenna brought up some questions, like the last time I was here, I spoke with everybody about workload. And that's probably one of our biggest issues as MAPE members is doing 2 or 3 jobs. So adding anything extra is really hard. And with that being said, we're sitting in this presentation and we're like, I don't think we've ever heard that there's any sort of workshop or training in this area. And when we go back to what I spoke about, workload, I was like, AI could really help with that. We're really excited about it. But when I think about my academic advisor at South Central, and her schedule goes out 3 weeks. So she's packed from morning until night. No way could she attend a training, let alone anything else. And what are we doing about that? What are we doing about getting this information out there to our staff on campuses, letting them know they have these opportunities that are free, but have no time to actually utilize them. And if they did have time, supervisors aren't letting them, right? So I'll go back. I'm Nicole Emerson. I'm the chair of the statewide week for MAPE, specifically Min-State MAPE. We represent 2,097 members currently. And I will let my colleague introduce himself.
Hello, Chair Sewell, trustees, Chancellor. I'm Aaron Pearson. I'm the accessibility specialist at Minneapolis Community Technical College. I'm also on the Min-State Meet and Confer team.
So I'm gonna let Aaron talk about AI and specifically how he sees it playing out in accessibility. I think it's a very eye-opening thing to hear, and I think it's timely in accordance with some of the committee topics today, and also the AI conversation yesterday. So I'll hand it off to Aaron.
So in my work, I work with over 10% of the students at MCTC. When I give presentations to faculty and staff, I say the number of students at the college who could be working with me is 25%. Academic advisors tell me it should be 50%. Faculty tell me that number should be 75%. So that's who we're talking about, is most of the students at our community and technical colleges who have diagnosed or undiagnosed learning disabilities, ADHD, autism spectrum, or PTSD, anxiety, depression, or just really negative, traumatizing educational experiences in their past. That's who I work with. And all of these technologies help. The difference between when I first engaged with these things, and even going back to being an undergraduate myself 30, 40 years ago, it's different. We can do things now that we couldn't do before. And that's all driving towards AI. Sure, you still got to think for yourself. You still there's boundaries to it. But we have situations now where students are being restricted in terms of the technology that they're using because of policies that we're creating. And this technology is what allows them to be a student at the college. So I think we have to be very careful about that and thoughtful about our policies. And I think it ties, and this all ties back to Equity 2030, which we have also been talking about the last couple of days. In terms, equity costs money and equity takes time. And as a staff member who works in equity, I don't have time. So we need that investment in those of us who are doing the equity work to be able to help to make our contribution to Equity 2030. And with that, AI has a lot of potential if we do it right, if we have the time for the training. If I could have most of the mundane tasks that I do faster or automated, then I could do the high level things that are around faculty training and support, student support of complex situations that I now don't have a lot of time. I try to, but I don't have a lot of time for because there are things that just eat time. So I think as we're thinking about AI and equity, to be thoughtful about where are those boundaries, how are they impacting students, how are they impacting the workload of the staff who are engaging in this essential work. Thank you.
And Aaron is also down 2 people in his department. So there's 2 people doing accessibility work at Minneapolis College. Right? Like that's just crazy to me. But that hits back to we're cutting people. We're offering Bessies or we're laying people off. We're not filling those positions, which requires people like Aaron to take on another job. We can't take on anymore. And I heard somebody use we all have to do what we can to get through whatever we're at our breaking point right now. And we're losing people and we're not competitive enough to bring people in. So thank you so much for letting us speak. We will answer questions if anybody has any.
Do they have any?
I had the opportunity to visit with Eric at lunch, and I think it'd be great. He's been doing this for a long time and has a lot of wisdom about how we can increase our equity goal achievement. I think Chair Sheffer, maybe he and some others could come for the committee at some point. He's got a lot of wisdom to share. So thank you very much. Amen. I agree 100%.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentations. Kevin Lindstrom, MSCF.
Mr. Chair, Chancellor Olson, trustees, my name is Kevin Lindstrom. I'm the president of the Minnesota State College faculty, and as always, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I've got just a couple quick business-related items that I'd like to talk about and then offer a closing comment. First, I'd like to offer a series of thank yous, starting with a thank you to Chair Soul and all of the trustees for inviting our contingent faculty to speak to you at your last board meeting. The simple act of hearing them means a lot. Translating what you heard into action will mean even more. I'd also like to thank the full board for inviting the executive director of the post board to be here. A special thank you goes to trustees Sharon and Teffer for pointing out to the executive director that what he's talking about is something we have done many, many times before
for many, many years, although it may be entirely new to him. And finally, a thank you to Chancellor Olson for your unyielding commitment to Equity 2030. As I mentioned at Meet and Confer, when you confirmed that commitment, MSCF stands with you in that commitment. Second item, as you might expect, is a little bit of discussion about the payroll errors audit and continuing issues. In many ways, my comments on this topic are second verse, same as the first. What I said to you in Moorhead stands just as much today as it did then, probably even more so. So just to bring you up to speed, last Friday was the first regular payroll date of the spring semester. 366 two-year faculty who were due a regular paycheck that day didn't get it. And as you know, no regular paycheck means no insurance premium deductions, means no insurance. And that's where several of our faculty sit right now. Beyond that, I wrote down a bunch of other stuff that I was going to say about payroll errors, but as I listened to Amy present the audit, the comment that she made on the front end kind of captures it all. At the core of this issue is a model containing deadlines that are fundamentally disconnected from the reality of a two-year college. I think it's important to notice we have this conversation that two-year college environment in this respect probably is quite different than university environments. And please, as we move forward, keep that in mind. But here's what I would offer from a personal perspective. I spent 35 years working in student affairs at a two-year college. I think I kind of get it. As we look at the causes, and I've watched the finger pointing, I've read the reports, there's a lot of they did something wrong, they did something wrong, they did something wrong. It's my belief that 10% of the problem here is errors at the campus level. Somebody didn't do their job on time, somebody put something in wrong, whatever. 90% of it is that model that is fundamentally flawed. You have the authority to drive change in that model and about those deadlines, and I encourage you to do so. Finally, in closing, I'd like to acknowledge our students and their loved ones and our colleagues and their loved ones who are under duress in the current federal government environment. We know they are facing threats, uncertainty, and attacks that impact them every minute of every day. I'll admit, I don't know exactly what to do and what to say about what's happening. I do know, however, that coming here today and just going through my regular routine and acting like it's business as usual would normalize what's going on, and I'll never do that. To those who are impacted, I want you to know I'm thinking about you. My colleagues at MSCF are thinking about you, and we care deeply about your well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Katie Jackson for USEF.
Good afternoon, Chair Soul, trustees, Chancellor Olson. My name is Katie Jackson. I was able to see you at our last meeting. It's really good to be here again with you today. For those who don't know, I am the business agent for MUSAF. So I work full-time at Teamsters Local 320, but recently left St. Cloud State University to really serve and support my ASF colleagues. And I'm very honored to do so. Since our last meeting, we've seen real drastic changes in our political landscape. Vice President J.D. Vance has been clear about his attitudes towards higher education, stating that the following: we have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country. He's called professors the enemy from within. There's really no doubt in my mind, like they're coming for us. In addition, all equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility policies and programs in every corner of our federal government have been eliminated. These changes have really created uncertainty and fear for your employees and administrative service faculty. While we cannot have all the answers, and I definitely don't expect you to have them, we do want to encourage Minnesota State campus leadership to continue to speak up, hold strong in our values, and over communicate with employees, even if you don't know anything. At a recent Teamsters event, myself and ASF President Christine Madro were able to connect with Attorney General Keith Ellison regarding MUSAF and Minnesota State's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. In this conversation, I'm happy to report that he assured us of his commitment to protect Minnesota residents through collaboration with other attorney generals in Democratic states. MUSAF and Teamsters Local 320, we stand strong and ready to support public education, teachers, faculty, and staff, immigrants, and the invaluable contributions that they make to this country. Diversity and inclusion of all citizens, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, color, sexual orientation, and gender identity. The rights of all workers to organize labor unions, stand united, collectively bargain, and peacefully protest unjust working conditions. We also always support the Constitution and rule of law. We really remain active, vigilant, and ready to support our members. We're closely monitoring government actions, as are you, and we'll continue to advocate for these rights and values for our members. So a little bit of a transition, because that's rough to transition out of. I'd like to provide you with some updates on the key issues we discussed at our last meeting. So last time I had talked to you about a 26-year employee that was in good standing at Southwest Minnesota State University, who was left without bumping or callback rights through a layoff. And I wanted you to know that that decision has been upheld through our grievance process. While we really celebrate the increased enrollment at Southwest, due to their partnership with RisePoint, we remain confused by their claims regarding their budget shortfall for FY26 that caused this layoff. On another note, we also want to celebrate the success of the MBA program through the partnership with RisePoint at St. Cloud State University. Through this partnership, SCSU has been able to serve non-traditional students, including myself. I just graduated in December. Thank you. Happy to talk about it. I had a wonderful experience. I had never taken a finance class, and let me tell you, they rocked me. I'm in my late 30s, and so it was a great opportunity. I have 2 little kids. Education as it stands, even though I already have a master's degree, doesn't really support where I'm at in my life to be able to do some of that, right? So being able to have a non-traditional experience was really valuable to me. Okay, back to this. Through this partnership, St. Cloud State has been able to serve non-traditional students and expand their staffing model. They've even added an academic advisor. I also want to be clear that by no means do we want to privatize higher education. Do I advocate for that? Simply, I want to recognize that our institutions are in a bit of a situation economically, funding from the state and all of those things. And so budgetary strains are really impacting our campus, and each of them are unique in how they're going to strategize out of those situations. Our seniority rosters continue to be compromised by the removal of longstanding bumping and unit callback rights. And while we await arbitration, we continue to seek a resolution with Minnesota State. So with that said, I do have a few asks for all of you, Minnesota State and Board of Trustees, to do the following. So provide each campus with consistent leadership in response to federal changes. We call upon each campus and leader to speak up in defense of DEI. When employees and students hear nothing, it creates and perpetuates fear. Our students need us to role model. And as those questions were being asked today of our student organizations, that's what I found myself asking. What are we doing to role model to our student leaders to support other students? And I don't know that I have a clear answer yet. Provide employees with information and expectations. It's important that employees and students know their rights regarding ICE and how to respond when they are confronted. Utilize union leadership as an asset as we work to fight for higher education and its role in society. Like, I'm all in and ready to help with that. Develop a consistent philosophy regarding third-party partnerships, specifically RisePoint, as we experience a decline in funding and enrollment. Support and empower each campus to serve students, increase enrollment, and ultimately retain employee positions. Thank you for your time and opportunity to speak here today on behalf of MUSAF and Teamsters. Also, our lobby day is at the end of February, and I'm sure we will be supporting a lot of your requests as well.
All right, thank you, Katie. We will stand for our values. Any questions for Katie? Jackie Johnson, trustee.
Thank you for that presentation and the others as well. There's a lot of emotion in the room, as there should be, it seems to me. And I do look forward to learning more about what the system is doing and saying to our students and to others, not just about our values, but also the resources that we're offering to students who may feel threatened. So I just believe that we need to have that somehow on our communication agenda. So thank you.
Chancellor Olson.
Thank you, Chair Soul. Thank you, trustees. Thank you, presidents. Thank you, bargaining unit leaders. Thank you, student leaders. Thank you, system office colleagues, and thank you, partners, for being with us here today. As exciting as things have been in this room over the last 2 days, they've been even more exciting on the other side of that closed door back there, where members of the system office team were scrambling to try to figure out what was happening and what were we going to say about it. And a thing would be prepared and drafted and ready to go, and then, uh-oh, here's another news update. This isn't a part of it, or this is a part of it, or now it's this. And so as we sat here this morning, so Monday night there was an announcement. Yesterday that team was scrambling to try to get some helpful messaging out. Then there was an injunction, and now we know this morning it was announced that there was a new memorandum that rescinded Monday's original memo, but maybe still this isn't exactly perfectly clear. So my deep appreciation to all of you, and noting especially the folks that were sequestered back in that room, who were reaching out to colleagues at the state level, at the federal level, each other, so we could try to provide as much clarity as was possible under the circumstances to our campuses, our students, and our employees. Events like this are fast moving, and it hasn't always been easy to get our hands on really accurate information. A lot of stuff was flying around in the social media that maybe wasn't quite accurate or we didn't know. And I don't think that's the end of it. I anticipate that in the days to come, weeks to come, years to come, there will be moments similar to this that'll affect our students, affect our colleagues, affect our state. So thank you all for your patience and your understanding amidst all that ambiguity. Perhaps as a step toward trying to figure out what's going on, I'm pleased to say that Vice Chair Erlinson and Trustee Richter and members of our government relations team are going to DC in just a couple weeks, I think, and make the rounds. And we heard about student organizations doing the same, and make the rounds and kind of put your ear to the ground and see what's happening and bring that back to us so we have kind of that firsthand intelligence about it. And then, of course, the state legislature has also made life interesting lately. My thanks to everyone who was there to help with the Senate Higher Ed meeting yesterday. Chair Soul's going to say a little bit more, I think, about that in a second. We had anticipated also being at the House yesterday and had folks around here lined up to have something to say. But then, of course, because of the Supreme Court ruling, they decided they weren't going to hold their hearings, but they will be. And so we're on alert for when that happens and ready in the wings when that is available to us to tell our story. And they like our story. So yes, let's all be sure to work together, in telling that story. And the legislative breakfasts will be kicking off soon. There's 6 of them scheduled, and those were a big hit last time. I'd like to reflect just a minute, if I may, Chair Sewell, about the testimonies that we heard today. So if there was a thread through them, it was something like this. There's a big need for humans, and a big need for humanity, and a big need for being humane. Serving fellow humans in all of our uniqueness, all of our abilities, all of our diversity, but others will not always treat us humanely. And that creates fear. And that creates apprehension. And here I might be tempted to quote FDR, I won't. But from my field, what we know about that is anxiety reduction comes through some of the things you heard our bargaining unit leaders talk about. Consistency, sharing information with each other, role modeling good behavior, being steadfast in how we approach things, and always working together. And you heard the students, the bargaining unit leaders all saying, let's work together toward these goals. So we will never waver. We will never waver in our commitment to equity and inclusion. In Minnesota State, all are welcome. And if people think they're not, they can come after us. All are welcome. With that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you, Chancellor. I have a report this month. I too want to thank Jamie Simonson and the legislative staff for getting the president to revoke his order suspending the grants. Good work behind that closed door. AI, I thought it was excellent discussion, both by North Dakota Chancellor and our own system staff who are working with AI tools. And I've asked Chancellor Olson to think about what's the next step to really amplify this, our involvement with this technology, so we can help students, so that we can help them learn and so we can do administrative tasks easier, and prepare students for working with this tool when they leave our school. We've talked about a task force or a working group or something to get the board involved to raise the profile of this work in the system. So more to say about that later. Trustee Abraham has resigned on Monday afternoon because she's taken a job that she says conflicts with her trustee responsibilities. So we will miss her, and we now have 2 student vacancies. Thank you, Chris, for hanging in there. So hopefully we'll get those filled soon. We had a couple of great news stories in the Star Tribune the last couple of weeks. We've circulated those. One was about a music and theater professor at Minnesota West. It wasn't about that, but it did feature his work with music and theater at Mankato too, Derek Parrish. Excellent story. He's now on the school board in Worthington. And we had a story this Sunday about the orthotics and prosthetics program at Century, which was excellent. And I'll look on Sunday's paper for the next story that Noel is going to plant. So Senate committee, I thought was awesome. I thought the presentations were great, were concise, were focused, answered the questions that they wanted answered, and they really like us. And it was evident by, there were a couple of questions, but they were softballs. But most of the speaking by the senators was how great we are. And that's a testament to our colleges and universities mostly, but also to our system staff who have great relationships with those senators. So thank you to Trustees Erlinson and Hipsch for your presentations, for Chancellor Olson, Vice Chancellor Mackey, Amy Jorgensen, and the presidents Reich, Downs, Seymour, Hanson, and Hoffman for making great presentations, but most of all to our government relations staff, Melissa Fanning, and to Bernie Oman for organizing a great audition for our House committee talks whenever that happens. And thanks to everyone who attended. Those of you who are here, there, the chair acknowledged the fact that we were there in large numbers. In November, we had the executive director of the Post Board here who said he wanted to separate the Minnesota State law enforcement, peace officer, criminal justice programs from licensing for peace officers in Minnesota because he wants to establish his own academy. And we rightfully pushed back on that. And I think he's learned a lot more after he met with us. And he met with us again on January 23rd. He met with Satasha, Senior Vice Chancellor Green Stephen, and Jesse Mason, and Presidents Reich and Bodine and Boyd. I think I've got everybody who was at that meeting, and backed off. So I think he got the word from the sheriffs and the chiefs that they liked our programs that prepared peace officers in Minnesota, and he got the word from his post board members that they didn't want to do this total separation. So they're backing off to some extent. I expect we'll still get some changes. I expect that they may ask or direct certain things to be taught in our skills or other programs, but we've made progress and more to come. They have a post board meeting in April, and we meet with them after that, and we're feeling good, much better about where we are in that regard. I did a campus visit at Normandale Community College last Thursday, and it was awesome. President Esther took me around, and every time we left a station, like 50 feet away, there'd be two more people waiting to pick us up and take us to the next station, and on and on. And we walked through the whole campus, and it was very fun. You see the diversity in person walking through Normandale campus. But what struck me the most was about our diversity work. And I've been thinking a lot about, how do we talk about our diversity work in the face of a federal administration that, says it's a dirty word. And I was struck by the services that Normandale offers to its students to help them succeed. You walk in the front door, and there's kind of an all one-stop shop, for people to direct you to all the resources that are available at the campus. And then over to the left is the advisors, and then just down the row is the counselors, and around the corner is the tutors, and around the corner from there is the food shelf and other basic needs support and emergency grants. And I think about all those things that are supported by the diversity staff and our diversity programs, and they are available to all students, regardless of their background, and they're all so helpful in elevating the performance of the students. It was very uplifting to see that very tangibly. So I think, I want to also thank our folks here at Metro State for hosting us, President Arthur, Executive Assistant Kimberly Herr, and of course our tech support, Andrew Johnson at Metro State, and Darren Berger from the system office. I talked to Darren at lunch, and I said, it really is going well today, Darren. He said, I'm writing it all down for when we get back in March. So that is what I had to say. Thank you. So next is the consent agenda. We have a consent agenda on the Board of Trustees agenda for this meeting, 7 items. Is there anyone who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, I'll ask for a motion and a second then to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Coles,
Aye.
trustee Erlinson,
Aye.
trustee Grubauska,
Aye.
trustee Hipsch, trustee Janicic, trustee Jackie Johnson,
Aye.
trustee Jana Johnson, trustee Moe, trustee Mario, trustee Richter, trustee Sharon, trustee Teffer. Chair votes aye, the motion carries. All right. Committee reports, workforce and organization.
Thank you very much, Chair Soul. We had a brief administrative meeting yesterday where we approved minutes, but also had a second reading of a proposed amendment to Board Policy 4.1, which just passed as part of our consent agenda. It was recommended out by our full committee, and then the committee met again today for a closed session on labor negotiations with the Board of Trustees.
All right, thank you. Academic and Student Affairs, trustee Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the post-board update. Very appreciated. The Academic and Student Affairs Committee met yesterday in a first reading. The first part of the board's 5-year review process. The committee heard proposed amendments to Board Policy 3.26, Intellectual Property. In a second read, the committee approved amendments to Board Policy 3.43, Accreditation, and moved that item to the board's consent agenda. The committee then heard from Presidents Annette Parker at South Central College and Kumara Jayasuriya, President of Southwest Minnesota State University, and their guest presenters, as they highlighted programming on their respective campuses, supporting students with cognitive and physical challenges. Next, the committee received a course placement audit update from the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. Finally, the committee heard a presentation from Satasha Green-Steven, the Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, and Michael Barrett, President of both DCTC and Inver Hills Community College. Together, they asked the committee to approve for approval to pursue a merger of the two campuses. The committee voted to support the intent of merging DCTC and Inver Hills Community College and the development of a comprehensive plan and timeline for such a merger, moving that item to the board's consent agenda. That completes our report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Teffer. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mr. Chair, if anybody had been doubting the commitment to DEI, this afternoon, we really felt the love, which was very, very powerful. And I think to that end, we had the opportunity to hear for the first time in a formal setting, the Interim Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Ida Watts, who is very actively planning a series of reunions amongst regional institutions to share best practices, to incent and continue our work as we move toward achieving our goals with regard to Equity 2030.
Thank you very much, Chair Grubauska. Finance and Facilities Committee, Chair Hipsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance and Facilities Committee meeting met this morning for a great discussion. Started out with Vice Chancellor Mackey giving an update on the system office redesign, the executive order that came out earlier in the week, and also an update on the governor's budget proposal. We had one contract for review that was a third party's owner rep, which was part of the consent agenda a moment ago. Majority of the meeting was talking about system facility initiatives and the comprehensive facility plans, having a great update from both Winona State as well as St. Cloud Community and Technical on their process they're currently going through. We had the first reading of Board Policy 6.9 on capital planning, an update on the Board Policy 5.10, which is the year-end fund balance changes that will be coming before us at the March meeting. And then we ended the conversation with an update on college and university financial performance.
Thank you, Chair Hipsch. Outreach and Engagement Committee, Chair Sharon.
Thank you. Outreach engagement met and had a presentation from the National Program on Industry and Workforce Partnerships. And this presentation highlighted our collaboration with America Archives and a collaboration with the Governor's Workforce Board, Greater MSP, and showcasing in its presentation how a collaboration across the state of our educational systems ability when partnering with these organizations or with businesses can drive workforce development and economic growth. By Minnesota State, what we learned is that by Minnesota State's involvement in these collaborations, we can build partnerships and allow for our students to have pathways to critical careers that get identified because of these partnerships. Our very own Shannon Bryant is participating in exploring national strategies for workforce innovation, looking particularly at strengthening alignment between education and workforce development, addressing critical workforce needs, and then, as I said, developing pathways to assist students to meet the demands of the workforce. And the second items on our agenda related to board policies. The first policy, 8.3, is focusing primarily on ensuring, it was a first reading, so simply informational, ensuring clarity on the relationship between colleges and universities and their foundation boards. And mostly we wanted the Board of Trustees to be alert that there were some changes. So when we get to the second reading, you can pay attention to a change in the audit requirement for those foundations that have less than $75,000 of assets. And the second policy, first reading, so informational 8.5, were some minor language changes that had to do with advisory committees that are appointed by the presidents. And in the language of this policy is a process for those appointments and what the responsibilities of the advisory committee are. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you, Chair Sharon. And finally, Joint Audit and Workforce and Organizational Effectiveness Committees, Co-Chair Coles.
Thank you very much, Chair Soul. Just prior to the board meeting, we had a presentation from our Chief Audit Officer, Amy Jorgensen, her external audit participants, Chris Jeffries and Alex Lebke, and our Vice Chancellor Davis, all looking specifically at our payroll payment performance in the last year or so. It was a robust report and a robust discussion, and I think very constructive and informative for the trustees. There were helpful suggestions, and I think a strong commitment on the part of both board staff that our standards are to get it right every time, and that will continue to be our urgent goal, and that we will be receiving periodic updates to make sure that the urgency of the issue is addressed appropriately. We also heard, by way of information, that the state legislative auditor will similarly be conducting an audit of our payroll performance record. So we've got a belt and suspenders approach going on that I think will only ensure that we're acting properly in the years to come. So with that, I'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Chair Coles. I also want to thank Carrie and Amanda for everything that you did to make these meetings go well. All the food, the Diet Mountain Dew, and 10 changes to the schedule between Thursday and Monday. You had to be agile for sure. Are there any, I would have thanked you earlier, but you forgot to put that in the script. Are there any reports from the trustees? Okay. Thank you, trustees, for your participation. Thank you, presidents, vice chancellors, system staff, bargaining units, students, et cetera, for your participation over the last couple of days. Our next meeting is March 18th and 19th here at Metro State. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Right, so 2 days.
Yeah.